So we on Monday we discussed about introduction to ORM. I did not discuss anything on Tuesday. Reason being the strength was very less. So we did some small project discussion and we just ended the session. That is the reason why I did not share any recording with you all. Let me quickly, within 10 minutes, tell you what is ORM and why we are discussing it. So you know, students, what happens is earlier we were using JDBC. Earlier, we were using the concept of JDBC for what purpose? For associating a Java program to the database. One side there will be a Java program, and if I say Java program, that means something which is based on object-oriented model, because Java is an object-oriented programming language. On the other hand, I have database, and the database is based on relational data model. We know that. So Java program will be associated with the database with the help of API, and that API is JDBC. JDBC acts as an interface and it helps you to connect your Java program to the database. We all know that, right? Now, when we use JDBC, we have to follow some set of steps. Okay, we discussed those 6 steps, how we can register the driver, how we can create connection class object and we can establish the connection. Then we create statement object. Then we write SQL queries. And then we do a lot of stuff, accomplishing 6 long steps in order to connect the Java program to the database. But there are some disadvantages. Let's say I'm writing my Java program on Eclipse today and tomorrow I switch to NetBeans. I am maintaining my database in MySQL today and tomorrow I switch to SQL Server. Then what? Again, I have to bring a lot of changes in my JDBC code. So that is one disadvantage. Apart from that, the length of the Java program was exceeding when we were using JDBC. Now, if the length of the program is very, large, it's very lengthy, the lines of code are too many, so the development time will also increase. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
And it affects the performance of the system also. So many drawbacks were there when we were using JDBC. So what they suggested is, instead of using JDBC, you start using concept called ORM. Now what ORM will do is, ORM will replace the complex code of JDBC. You don't have to write SQL queries also. There will be some inbuilt methods which will perform the CRUD operations. CRUD operations means whatever insert, update, delete, retrieval operations that you perform on a database table, all those operations can be performed using ORM technique without writing the SQL query. Along with that, there are certain advantages, very important for interview. Advantages of ORM. What are the advantages of ORM? Number one is it reduces the complexity. Reduces the complexity of programming. It provides portability. What do you understand by portability? What is a portable code? What is a portable AC, portable fan? Yes, can anybody tell me what is portable AC, portable fan, all these things?
Portability means it can run on multiple platforms.
So if I change from Eclipse to any other IDE or from MySQL to any other DBMS software, I don't have to change my code. Very minor changes will be required and the same code will be running everywhere. So isn't it a good feature? Is it a good feature or a bad feature?
Good feature.
Good feature.
So these are the advantages of ORM technique. What ORM technique will do, it will reduce the complexity, it will provide portability to your code, it will increase the performance, and it will reduce the length of code. And what basically it is doing, whatever you are writing in a Java program, that is object-oriented model, that it will convert into relational model. And that is why the full form of ORM is nothing but object relation mapping. It maps the data present in object model form into relational model form, ORM, object relation mapping. And while it is doing all of that, it provides the advantages of reducing the complexity, portability, increased performance, and reduces length of code and reduces the overhead of developer also. Developer doesn't have to spend a lot of time in SQL queries and all of that. That developer can spend more time in programming the business layer now. So the time is saved. Note it down. It's very important. Advantages of ORM. So object relational mapping is a programming technique for converting the data between relational databases and object-oriented programming model, such as Java. So there are a lot of tools that are used for implementing ORM. So I hope you have studied this thing. Computer networks have you studied? OSI model, TCP/IP model. Anyone who is familiar with the concepts of computer networking? CSC students, you don't have CN in your syllabus? Akansha, you have this subject in your syllabus.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, Akansha, can you tell me? My God, you people, you are forgetting your BTech subjects. I think there is some problem with Corona batch students. Hmm? Okay, can anybody tell me what is OSI model? Even EC students also would have studied OSI model. Ah, CCN is also same. Concepts of computer networks, right? Can anybody tell me what is OSI model? See this
Ma'am,
Corona.
I only know the full form of OSI.
Very good. 7 layers. No. Why OSI? Okay, tell me whether it is a practical model. Have we implemented it?
Mm,
Yes, 7 layers are there in OSI model, but have we implemented that model? Is it practically possible to implement OSI?
Don't know, ma'am.
Anyone from CSE, EC? Okay. Yes, Sahil, very good. See, students, OSI model is not a practical model. Okay, no one ever implemented OSI model. It is a conceptual model. There is no practical implementation of OSI model. Okay, but it is a set of concepts, and those set of concepts, 7 layers, physical layer, data link layer, network layer, transport layer, session, presentation, application. See, I studied CN in my BTech days. Still, I remember what is OSI and what are the 7 layers. What is wrong with you people? I am not understanding. But some things should be, embedded in your brain as an engineering student. So please go through all these concepts which are very important because your complete internet working is based on OSI model. Now, the 7 layers have some set of functions. Okay, see physical layer, what it does? It will convert the data bits into electrical signals between the sender and receiver. What data link layer will do? It will add security, error checking. Then there are some error checking algorithms. Checksum, CRC algorithm, all those algorithms are there. But it is not a practical model. Now, who implemented OSI model? There is a model called TCP/IP model, which is used by the internet today. So, in TCP/IP is basically one small baby of OSI model, which is practically implemented model, and it follows the concepts defined by OSI. But OSI itself is not an implemented model. Same way, ORM technique is there. Why ORM technique is used? For mapping objects in Java program into database objects. Okay. But how to implement ORM technique? For its implementation, we have different tools. It is a conceptual model. It is just a set of guidelines. Now, who implements the ORM technique? What are the tools that implement ORM technique? So we have a lot of tools: Enterprise Java Beans, Castor, Spring DAO, Toplink, Java Data Objects, and one such tool is Hibernate. One such tool is Hibernate. So Hibernate is basically a tool which is used for implementing the guidelines provided by object relational mapping model. Am I clear, students? Hibernate is one tool which is used for implementing ORM. So for better understanding, those who are familiar with computer networks, consider ORM as your OSI model. Just example I am taking, okay? They are nowhere related. OSI is completely networking concept. And assume Hibernate as your TCP/IP. So I think if you have written a CN exam, one question definitely comes in exam. Difference between OSI and TCP/IP model. So ORM is conceptual model and Hibernate is the practical implementation of ORM. So what we are going to use in order to implement ORM in programming, we will be using the concept of Hibernate. We will use Hibernate tool. Sometimes in some books, even in this PDF also, they use the word framework. But that is not correct. Framework term is not correct. So I would suggest you to use the term tool in interviews. Okay, Hibernate is a tool which is used for implementing ORM technique. Any doubts so far?
No,
What is
ma'am.
ORM? Yes, girls, any doubt in what is ORM?
Ma'am,
Yes,
can you repeat why object relation mapping is used, like uses of it,
yes, I'll tell you.
definition?
See, if you look at this slide, here we are writing a Java code, right? Class user, and the user is having two variables, name and salary. This is how we write programs in Java language. Correct, students?
Yes, ma'am.
And Java is object-oriented language, so we can say that it is object world. It is object world. Now, same thing if I will implement in a DBMS software, what I will do is I will create a table, and the table will have two columns. One column will be name and the other column will be salary. So basically you see, whatever we are doing here, same thing we are doing here. But in reality, what is happening? In reality, in a object world, we move from one class to another. Okay, one client class will be there. One student class will be there. Employee class will be there. All these are classes. Any Java program is basically a collection of classes and interfaces, right? Packages will be there, some classes will be there, some interfaces will be there, and you will write your complete logic inside the methods which are present in the class. Am I right, students?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is your object world. This is your object world where you are writing everything as a class, and each class is connected to one another. Whereas in your relational world, relational database, relational world, everything is stored in the form of tables. Okay, like this. Everything will be stored in the form of tables. Are these two structures similar?
No.
One side I have my object world, which is your Java program as a collection of interconnected classes. At the other side, I have a database table, which is having some set of columns and some set of rows. This is a table. So a Java program and a table in a database, do they have the same structure?
No, ma'am.
The structure is not same, but still we have to do mapping. We need to translate, we need to map the data present in the object world, the objects that we create in the object world in the form of Java program into relational world. Okay, that conversion is required. Whenever we try to convert objects which are present in object world into objects of relational world, we require some mapping technique. We require some mapping technique. And ORM is used for this mapping technique. That's it. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
ORM is used for this mapping technique. Now it is clear. Someone who asked this question from me.
Yes, ma'am.
Just remember this. We use ORM technique in order to map the object world objects into relational world objects. That's it. Done? If you want to make a note of it for, better understanding, you can write it. Shall we proceed, students?
Yes, ma'am.
So you see, there is one issue called as object relation impedance mismatch. All of you, please go through this slide once. 1 minute for everyone to read this slide. Interconnected graph is nothing but this kind of structure. It's like a graph. One class connected, like right now it is like a tree, but if we connect these classes also with one another, then it will be like a graph only, right? So it's like a graph. So this line is very important. So this is the reason. This object relation impedance mismatch is the reason why we are using ORM technique. Done?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is all about ORM. Those who were not present in Tuesday's session, you need to cover few concepts because we discussed these things in little bit detail. But major things I have already told you. Whatever will be asked in interview, that has been covered. Now see vendor independence. Can you explain this feature to me? Benefits of ORM vendor independence. Anyone? We will proceed only if someone will respond to what I am asking.
Works on different softwares.
So which point I dictated to you equivalent to this feature?
Uh,
Portability.
Portability, yes.
Yes, this is what we discussed as portability. Okay, same thing they have discussed with the word vendor independence. So you don't have to get confused what is vendor independence. Okay, vendor independence means if we switch to any other platform, that is not going to affect my code, because my code, if it is based on ORM, is vendor independent. It doesn't matter which vendor it is. It is Oracle vendor or Microsoft vendor or IBM. No matter what, the same code will work. CRUD operation. What is CRUD operation? If I give you one database to be attached to a Java program, what possibilities are there? What operations will you perform on a database table?
We can add or create, delete.
Yes, either we can insert something or we can delete something to from the table, or we can update something present already in the table, or we can read something, we can fetch something or retrieve something. So same thing is called as the major operations possible for any database table is considered as CRUD. CRUD, okay, create, read or retrieve means the same, update and delete. Now, when we were using JDBC for creating means insert. For inserting, we have insert query. For retrieval, we have select query. For update, we have update query. And for delete, we have delete query. Right? Now, in ORM, what is the replacement for all of that? So when we say insert operation, in ORM, you don't have to write the query. You simply have to invoke a method called as persist. It is in small letters. Let me write it in the same manner. Persist. Okay, so you don't have to write any SQL query now, because developers are not meant to, deal in SQL commands. Developers are meant to write logic for their business layer, okay, back end of the software. Then coming to read or retrieve operation, we have select query. In JDBC, we used to write select query. Now, what you have to do is find method is there. Just invoke find method. Okay, that is the reason why we are easily, changing the platforms, because queries are not there. We are using inbuilt methods. So inbuilt methods will work in the same manner on every platform. For update operation, we will use merge. And for delete, we will use remove. Okay. These are the equivalent inbuilt methods that we will be using if you are working on Hibernate. So these methods, these inbuilt methods are applicable for all the databases, independent of which vendor has introduced that DBMS software. Vendor is not involved. It's vendor independent. Just have a 30 seconds look, whatever is written in front of you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes,
JDBC and Hibernate both are APIs, right?
both are.
APIs, no?
JDBC is an API. Now for Hibernates, there is a separate API which is JPA.
Okay.
Java Persistence API. So now I'll show you what your program will look like now. See, there is a Java application, there is an API, and whatever methods are supposed to be implemented, which are proposed in that API, that you will be implementing with the concept of Hibernate, and this is your database. So the objective is to attach your Java application to the database. Now in between these people are involved, your JPA and Hibernate. And combinedly they are implementing what? They are implementing ORM technique so that the Java objects can be converted into database objects. Any doubt so far? This is not easy concept, students. You need to spend a lot of time. You need to increase your self-study hours also. So this is our second session. Those who were not present in the first session, they can ask for the recorded videos. I will share. I think I shared also. Shall we proceed?
Yes.
Now, there is one concept, the persistence life cycle. Okay, so when we are saying that the Java object will be mapped to a relational object, so while mapping it, that object will go through a lot of states. Okay, when we are doing this mapping, the object which is present in the Java program, it will go through a lot of states. So all those states form the persistence life cycle. Okay, there is a life cycle that it undergoes. For example, in your multi-threading also you see the thread has a life cycle. Same way, any object which is undergoing that mapping operation will also go through four states. Four states are there, very easy. I'll show you quickly what are those states. Very important question from interview point of view. So before starting this topic, they have shown you how ORM is basically implementing abstraction. So when we use a mobile phone for dialing a number and we connect to any friend, we don't know what is happening inside. We are not associated with the details. Same way, ORM is also providing high level of abstraction. The mapping is getting done. You are performing the CRUD operations and it is affecting the data in your database, but you don't know how things are happening inside. Because directly what we are doing, we are using one entity manager is there, we are using it. It is having some inbuilt classes that we are using. We are using a lot of packages. Everything that ORM is offering to us, we are using and we are making mapping possible without going into the details. That is the reason why they are saying ORM provides high level of abstraction. 30 seconds. Okay, so before discussing this slide, I'll discuss this with you. This is the persistence life cycle. Why we are saying persistence is because whatever changes we will be bringing to the database through the Java program should last forever. It should be a permanent storage. That is why we are using the term persistence. Persistence means something that lasts. So if we are performing any operation and that object we are storing in the database, it should last forever. That storage should be persistent. So these are the various stages through which any object goes. So first of all, it does not exist. Okay, that's not a stage. Just they are trying to explain you that at this point it does not exist. Then we create one object in the Java program. Once you create an object in the Java program, it enters new state. How we create object in Java?
Using new.
Using new operator. Okay, class name, object name is equal to new operator and constructor. Once you do that, the object enters the new state. That means it has been created. In some books or on internet, in some documents, you will find that new state is also mentioned as transient state. Let me write in the chat box. Transient state. So don't get confused. New state and transient state are both same. Then it enters the managed state. Now managed state is where all the CRUD operations are performed. Create, read, update, delete, whatever you want to perform on that object. Everything will be performed and then the changes will be saved to the database permanently, persistent storage. Now, do you remember we close the connection while using JDBC? There is one step, closing the connection. Same way, here also, if you close the connection, then the object enters the detached state. Or if you perform delete operation, then it should not enter the database, right? Out of all the 4 CRUD operations, creating, updating, and reading is happening with the database. But if you are executing the delete operation, the remove method, then your object should go to the removed state, right, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So these are the various states of the persistence life cycle. Please make a note of it in your notebook. And one by one, we will see the definitions also. One-liner, two-liner definitions are there. Just draw it. This is not required. Only these 4 states are there. New, detached, managed, and removed. Quickly. Done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, whenever the object enters the managed state, you see what happens. In the application, that means in your Java program, you will have certain objects. Okay, object 1, object 2. This is 2, okay, not 3. So in the application, there will be some objects that you have created. Now, before reflecting the changes into the database, there will be some, you can say, sort of buffer space, basically where you are performing all the CRUD operations. That space is called as the persistence context. So buffer space is something that I am using, but basically you should not use this term for it. It is a memory location where your intermediate operations are happening. Intermediate operation means the operations are being applied and it has not been saved into the database till now. For the intermediate operation, that space is being used. So in technical terms, I can say that each instance will be associated with a persistence context, and within the within the entity instances, their life cycle are managed. So within the persistence context, it will undergo all the phases that we just now saw in the life cycle. Now, I am using one term, entity. Do you remember your ER diagram lecture? ER diagram in DBMS in your college days, not in my session. What is entity? Can anybody tell me in ER diagram?
Real world object.
Very good. So entity means real world object regarding which we are storing the data in a program or in the database table. See, whatever database tables you have created so far, they store information related to something. Employee, company, student, car, house, loan. So any object can either be conceptual or physical object for which we store data in the database table. That object is called as entity. So entity is basically a real world object for which we perform all the data, like we store data in the database for any entity. So either I will use the term object or I'll use the term entity. You should not get confused. Both are same. So if I am storing data related to a student, then what is my entity?
Student.
Student is my entity. If I am storing data related to employee, employee is my entity. So for managing the entities, there is one entity manager. What is entity manager? We will discuss in more detail during the programming session. For now, you remember that for managing the entities, we require entity manager. So this entity manager will associate each object to the persistence context, and each entity manager instance is associated with the persistence context, which is nothing but a memory location where all the CRUD operations are being performed and the life cycle of the entity is managed. So this is little complex compared to your previous session, students, because slowly we are going up. Slowly we are going towards advanced part of programming. So take out some time today and try to cover all these things at your own pace if you are not understanding. Okay, so objects are entities. Don't get confused. Why I am stressing a lot on this is because some students are from different branches and they might get confused. So entity is nothing, entity is just your object. Don't get confused. What is entity manager? Entity manager is an interface used by application developers to interact with the JPA runtime. How to use it, I will show you in the hands-on session. Persistence context. Persistence context defines a scope under which particular entity instances are created persisted, and removed. Now see what is happening in each of these, phases of the life cycle. So this is the new state or the transient state. Just have a single read, all of you. This is how we create object in a Java program. Done, students. So nothing complicated in new state. Any doubts in new state?
No.
So if you want to note down, you can note it down. But usually the language used in this PDF is little complicated. So I don't encourage you people to note down from here. So when an entity object is initially created, its state is new. In this state, object is not yet associated with the entity manager and has no representation in the database. Now, an entity object becomes managed when it is persisted to the database via an entity manager's persist method. Now tell me, what is persist method used for? Look into your notes and tell me. Why we use persist method? Can anybody tell me what is the equivalent operation for persist method? You can look into your notes.
Ma'am, insert.
Yes, insert. The C for the CRUD operation, create, is the persist method equivalent. So whenever you are inserting something into the database or you are performing any other CRUD operation, it actually enters the manage state because you are trying to manage that object. Okay, so you see here persist method. Flush means you are permanently storing everything to the database. Find means retrieve method. If you remove, that means it's a delete operation and it will come to the removed state. Then there is a detached state. So what is detached state in ORM? Consider it like closing the connection of JDBC. Okay, you have written a program. You are using JDBC API to connect it with your database, and then you close the connection. Okay, so usually what we use there, connection class object, let's say it is con.close. When we do it, we close the connection between the database and the Java program. Similar way, here what we do, if you use this detach, then that object will be disconnected from the persistence context. Let me go back to the diagram. When you invoke detach method, the object will no longer be associated with the persistence context. So this association will be broken. Object connected to the persistence context, this connection will be broken, and that will take your object to the detached state. The entity instance is an instance with a persistent identity that is no longer associated with a persistence context. Usually because the persistent context was closed or the instance was evicted from the context. So the language is little complicated, but for better understanding, take the example of closing the connection in JDBC. Same thing, if you do it here using the detach method, it will enter to the detached state, and it is possible to come back to the managed state from detached state. Okay, how it is possible? By using persist method one more time. So going and coming back from these two is easy just by invoking the right method. Okay. So nothing complicated in detached state also. Now the last one. A removed entity instance is an instance with a persistent identity associated with a persistence context but scheduled for removal from the database. So if you invoke this method, remove method, what is the equivalent CRUD operation for remove? Equivalent CRUD operation for remove.
Delete.
Delete operation. So if you are deleting something from the database table, that means you will reach the removed state. And once it is removed, that means